The FBI and the U.S. Secret Service are investigating what appears to be a second attempt on former U.S. President Donald Trump's life. We'll discuss the latest in the investigation and what it means for the presidential campaigns. Hello, I'm Arlen Naidu, and this is The Heat. Former U.S. President Donald Trump met with acting Secret Service Director in Mar-a-Lago on Monday, that's in Florida, after an apparent second assassination attempt. The suspected gunman, Wesley Routh, is now charged with federal gun crimes. Prosecutors say the 58-year-old came within 500 meters of the former president, who was with the Secret Service detail on the golf course. CGTN's Nitza Soledad Perez is covering the latest developments from West Palm Beach, Florida. Nitza, great to have you with us. What more can you tell us about the suspected gunman?
Well, the suspect of this second apparent assassination attempt actually appeared here at federal court in West Palm Beach, Florida on Monday morning. He was dressed in a blue jumpsuit. While he listened to the charges against him, he was accompanied by a public defender. U.S. Secret Service agents spotted the man on Sunday hiding in the bushes with a high-powered rifle at Trump's South Florida golf club. He was charged with possessing a firearm as a felon and possessing a firearm with an obliterated serial number. The suspect, identified as 58-year-old Wesley Routh from Hawaii, is a former roofer. His criminal history includes a standoff with a weapon at his workplace in North Carolina over 2 decades ago. Routh fled the scene after the Secret Service agents opened fire, leaving behind his rifle, a backpack, 2 bags, a digital camera, and some food. He was later apprehended a few miles from the golf course during a traffic stop.
And it was perplexing, somebody who actually at the time we weren't positive that we had the suspect, we had the vehicle, we thought we had him, but his facial affect was so flat. His demeanor was relaxed. I honestly thought it looked like somebody who had just left a church picnic and was on his way home. And I mean, the interstate was crawling with law enforcement.
According to the New York Post and his social media archives, Routh voted for Trump in 2016 and was once featured in a New York Times article about Americans volunteering for Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely an interesting character. He was very driven to help Ukraine, even though some of his ideas were completely nonsensical. He was financially despondent, had around $60 in his bank account, and was living out of the back of his car. So it kind of seemed like the end of his grand plans for Ukraine.
This latest incident follows another attempted assassination 9 weeks ago, where Trump was grazed by a bullet during a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. The Secret Service is under renewed pressure to ensure his safety. President Biden commented on the incident Monday morning.
Thank God the president's okay. I think we got a full report so far. We're down there tonight. But one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs.
Authorities have not disclosed a motive for this assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Now, during a press conference late this afternoon, we learned a lot about the suspect. First, he was in the vicinity for 12 hours prior to being discovered by Secret Service agents. Also, he had an extensive criminal record. But most importantly, during that press conference, the acting Secret Service director acknowledged that they need a paradigm shift and more resources to protect the former president and the other presidential candidate. Anand?
All right, Nitza, there have been concerns about politically motivated violence ahead of the election. Now, will the security detail that's assigned to Trump be increased? I mean, we did hear the president say that they need more help. And what kind of impact is this going to have on the campaigns?
Yeah, President Biden said it. The acting Secret Service director repeated it this afternoon. But hopefully they're waiting for Congress to actually approve the resources they need. That said, this is not stopping former President Donald Trump. He will be delivering remarks in an hour from now at Mar-a-Lago about cryptocurrency and the launch of a crypto platform called World Liberty Financial. This is a platform that will be run by his two sons, Donald Jr. and Eric. And he will continue tomorrow. He will be hosting a town hall in Michigan. And then on Wednesday, he will be having his large-scale event, the first one since this second apparent assassination attempt. Anand.
Thanks, Nitsa. That's Nitsa Soledad Perez reporting from Florida. Well, for more on the Florida investigation and the U.S. presidential race, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Florida is Jadan Horyn. He's a political analyst. Here with us in our studio, Rina Shah is a political commentator and CEO of Rilax Strategies. Also in Washington, D.C., Douglas Sloan is principal of National Capital Strategy Group and former first vice president of the D.C. NAACP. And Frank Sesno is a professor with the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University and the former CNN Washington bureau chief. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Frank, let me start with you. Great to see you. It's been some time. You've covered politics in Washington for a very long time. And of course, there have been several instances of people targeting presidential candidates and even presidents themselves. And we don't know whether this latest attempt was a sort of lone wolf scenario or whether there were others involved. The investigation is continuing. There's now been 2 attempts on Trump's life in 2 months, really. I mean, looking at the broader implications, what does this mean for the political environment, you know, in what is already a very polarized political environment in the country?
It means that certainly in this next several weeks leading up to Election Day, we are in the most perilous and most dangerous time in terms of political violence that we have seen here in generations and maybe ever in the context of a presidential race. Certainly if we go back to the horrible times of 1968 when Bobby Kennedy was shot and Martin Luther King was shot, this country was being torn to pieces. But what we've got now is a very divided electorate. We've got a lot of outside interference, according to people who are cyber experts and cybersecurity experts from Iran and Russia and other places. Internally, we certainly have highly polarized, angry, and very radicalized people in many cases taking to social media and driving conspiracy theories. And unfortunately, we have candidates who are driving some of those narratives as well.
Right.
And as we've seen with certain examples about, you know, allegations, wild allegations, not based on hard fact and not uttered with any real discipline or nuance, that there are immigrants eating pets in a town in Ohio. So this is a very, very difficult and dangerous time. And as whatever we may say and hear and read and learn about Secret Service coverage, it's all but impossible to completely guarantee the security of these candidates every moment of the day because they are in public places.
Right.
So this is a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, so looking at what's been happening, Frank, over the past 2 months, I mean, how big a challenge is this for the Secret Service, indeed for other law enforcement agencies as well? We did hear the president say in that brief comment he made there that, look, the service needs help. What kind of help will they get?
Well, they need more people, they need more money, they need more technology. As we saw in the first assassination attempt, they need better coordination with law enforcement, because when the president or the candidate goes someplace, it's not just the Secret Service that's providing security, it's state police, it's local police, and others. And so there has to be a lot of coordination. And there are so many things that can go wrong. One thing going wrong you know, ruins the whole thing, shall we say, with understatement. And the Secret Service and the others who are trying to provide the security need to be right in all cases, or something terrible can happen. So that's where we are right now. And you know, we don't need to go too far into it here, but there are many ways that bad things can happen to candidates when they're in places or en route. So there's a lot to worry about.
Jadan, the New York Times had a piece on what's been happening. It was more of a commentary piece, and it says that anger against Trump and anger stirred by Trump, in the words of the New York Times, has reshaped the political landscape of the United States. The newspaper quoted a Democrat representative from the state of Colorado. That representative is Jason Crow. It quoted him as saying, and I'm quoting him directly here, he said, "One of the things I'm most concerned about is the normalization of political violence in our political system." And I should add that Jason Crow does actually sit on that committee that's investigating the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump. That was in Pennsylvania. But to his point about political violence in the political system, do you believe that political violence has been normalized in the United States?
No, and I don't think there's any evidence to support that claim. Mm-hmm. The fact that crazed individuals are taking action to remove Donald Trump from this world, we can say, is a factor of the rhetoric, not of a normalization of violence. What has changed in this election cycle is a normalization of rhetoric that paints the former president to Nazis and people that individuals who are destabilized or unstable might believe they need to take action on. And I think while the former panelist made a comment about Donald Trump's comments in relation to immigrants, which the media has jumped all over. The media hasn't done the same type of critical analysis of Democrats' comments to Donald Trump being a threat. If someone is a threat, in general, you want to neutralize that threat. If the answer isn't the ballot box, I believe another congressman inartfully said Donald Trump needs to be, quote, eliminated. So, but again, I don't really want to be a whataboutism. What I do think here is that political rhetoric in the United States needs to return to about policy differences, personality differences. And as long as we focus on personalities, then it puts individuals at threat.
Douglas Sloan, to Jaden's point about the rhetoric that we're hearing during these election campaigns, both President Biden as well as Vice President Kamala Harris, they've condemned political violence. They've issued statements doing so. Trump is blaming his political rivals for the language and rhetoric they have been using, although he himself has used very inflammatory language as well. But, as Jaden pointed out, that there have been politicians talking about taking him out, of eliminating him. Many have talked about punching him in the face. President Biden himself said, look, I'd like to take Donald Trump behind the shed and deal with him. I mean, to what extent is that kind of rhetoric driving what we're seeing right now?
Well, I don't know if we can necessarily say that most of that inflammatory rhetoric is coming from the Democratic side. Trump famously has said many inflammatory, violent things. Yeah. He talks about beating up people at his rallies and so on and so forth. He said, get him out of here. Back in the day, the police would have had their way with him and so on and so forth. And, regarding him being associated with Nazis, well, neo-Nazis associate themselves with him. The Proud Boys associate themselves with Trump, and they've been associating themselves with the Republican Party at alarming rates ever since Trump started running for office back in 2015, 2016. So, I think it's some of the rhetoric that Trump espouses that some of these neo-Nazis find appealing that make them want to associate themselves with Trump. Remember when they had that march in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Trump refused to condemn the Proud Boys that ended up killing somebody that weekend. He said, stand back and stand by. He refused to condemn these neo-Nazi groups. So it's no wonder that they're being associated with him. And then you have his own vice president, J.D. Vance, who called him America's Hitler. So I struggle to see how most of this is necessarily coming from the Democratic side. And the two people that were alleged, the one guy that took a shot at him and the other guy that was allegedly getting ready to shoot him, both of them had voted for him. Both of them were registered Republicans at one point. So I agree with the former speaker that we do need to tone down the rhetoric, but a lot of that rhetoric is coming from the GOP. And I think that they need to have a strong look in the mirror about what they've been saying and how it affects their presidential nominee.
Jaden, a very quick, brief response from you from what Douglas has just told us.
I mean, Joe Biden palled around with Strom Thurmond, who was a known member of the KKK, and it took him almost 40 years to denounce him. I think Democrats have lots of egg on their face if we're going to talk about associations with outright racists. But that aside, I will say this. Both Republicans and Democrats like to use incendiary rhetoric and to personalize as opposed to make it about policy. The American people are saying they want something different. Ultimately, it's time to show them that we can do that.
Rina, great to have you with us in the studio. You know, Frank mentioned a moment ago the situation concerning cats and dogs in Ohio. A bizarre statement from President Trump during the debate, but it seems to have got a life of its own right now. I mean, and it's led, you know, it has consequences, these things. The city of Springfield in Ohio has been the target of bomb threats since that last presidential debate when Trump made those false statements about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. And over the weekend, 2 hospitals went into lockdown. A university closed its campus. The governor of Ohio has been talking about this on the U.S. television network ABC. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I think these discussions about Haitians eating dogs and cats and other things needs to stop. We need to focus on what is important. What is important is that we get primary care health to everyone in a very growing city, that we do other things in regard to housing. These are kind of basic things that we need to do. We need to focus on those and not this discussion about Haitians eating dogs. It's just not helpful. And again, these people are here legally. They're here legally. And they want to work, and they are, in fact, working. And when you talk to the employers, what the employers tell you is, you know, we don't know what we would do without them.
So the Republican vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, he's been talking about it over the weekend. In fact, he's sort of doubled down on what what former President Trump had to say. And he defended the statement, saying, look, it does focus attention on immigration. What do you make of what's going on?
Well, J.D. Vance, right after he was named VP pick, started off with the childless cat lady comments, following him around essentially. I could have never guessed this election would be dominated by cats or talk of cats and talk of cannibalization of cannibalism of pets. My gosh, I'm disgusted, because I'm somebody that's a lifelong vegetarian for a reason. I think all lives matter. And, you know, we're talking about innocent lives here. Baseless claims about a community eating animals that are not typical to this culture is just so disturbing. But it takes away from the great conversations we could be having about the issues. And I am frustrated. I'm angry that this is what this almost 80-year-old GOP nominee chooses to do with his time. But I do think it's evidence also of his cognitive decline. You know, this is somebody that should be in a retirement home or spending time with his grandkids, and instead he's standing on a debate stage trying to say he'd be a great next president. I'm not voting for him because I think he is a pathetic man who pushes lies and then says, I'm a victim. The entire Republican Party's ideology for the longest time has been that they are not victims. Everything has been rooted in we are individuals who have our own ability to shape our future. All you hear from Trump these days is talk of how everybody's coming to get him. He'll never surrender because he's the fighter. I think he looks weak. I think Vance next to him looks weak. And I think this is a profoundly sad moment in our nation's history.
Frank, you know, as Rina points out, this focus on cats and dogs and whatever happens in Ohio is a distraction. It takes away attention from some of the key issues that these candidates need to be addressing. And I'm wondering to what extent the media can play a role, not just in reporting those policy issues, but also in tamping down the rhetoric. I mean, many of those comments from political leaders about wanting to punch Trump was actually on mainstream television channels.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And at one place where the Republicans may really have a strong point to make is the media. Why didn't the media go into Springfield, Ohio earlier and report what was going on there? And you know what they would have found if they had? Just what the governor was talking about, or certainly overwhelmingly what the governor was talking about. A group of legal immigrants, fully documented, who are working, who are contributing to attempting to rebuild this city. It was a Republican governor who once said it was because of immigration that this city rose back up. That mayor, actually, was Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor of New York City. The immigrant story has become so distorted and so filled with bellicosity and hatred and ignorance, and we've taken all nuance out of it. And that's what we need. So what do the media need to do? They need to get out and help people tell their stories. Are there abuses? Are there problems? Are there serious complications? 100% yes, whether it's housing or anything else. But what we've had in our campaign, unfortunately, and what the media haven't done is get out of the studio and get out, and that's not a criticism here at all, but get to these places and tell these stories, because they are meaningful and powerful, and they will make a difference if people hear them.
Right, Jadan, let's look at the issue of immigration. I mean, it is one of the key issues in this election. Donald Trump is threatening to deport everybody if elected. I mean, is that just election talk? I mean, as Frank pointed out, you know, his portrayal of the way immigrants behave is very different from reality. And in fact, there are many, many economists in the United States who have said that the role played by immigrants is key to the fact that we have seen economic growth in this country. I mean, is he going to threaten that?
Yes, but I want to back up just a little bit. Yeah. What we do know is, on the point of the media reporting on immigration, Venezuelan gangs were reportedly taking over apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado. The media debunked it as a myth, and then because the city officials claimed it wasn't happening, and then the FBI came out and gave evidence that in fact it was, and they were concerned about transnational criminal organizations, something that Kamala Harris herself has referenced, actually being involved. So I think one thing we really need in the conversation is the difference between legal and illegal immigration, and the real problem that I think Donald Trump has highlighted in his forever inartful way, which is the federal government continues to fail to have a plan to handle immigration, whether it's legal or illegal. Planning 15,000 legal refugees into a small city with minimal resources that overwhelm the hospital systems and the schools. Yes, it helps the economy, but how does a community cope? The question here is, what will happen to illegal immigrants, and will Donald Trump attempt them? Yes, I do believe he would, but that's not the same about legal immigration. So I think we do need to separate that and separate our rhetoric around that. People that come to this country, we are built on immigration. There's acclimation that occurs. Our government has the resources for ill-advised mass movements of people. The federal government needs to do better. And it's incumbent upon our president and our vice president, both of whom are sitting in office, to give the resources to the government to accommodate those communities that they are resettling people in, and not wait for a candidate to make bellicose statements and have the media run to cover something.
Rina, on the issue of immigration, and if we look at the issues that are being discussed during this election campaign, there was a time when Democrats were on the defensive. And this was seen as a winning issue for Republicans. Has that changed now?
So much has changed. I mean, let's just look at how so many people in the media talk about immigration. Just what we heard just now was a bunch of mumbo jumbo of immigrants being resettled here, there, and everywhere, and who's responsible and all that. It's also confusing. As people who appear tangential to the media, like myself, as guests, it's important we talk about this plainly and just use basic words here. Because what's happened is that Washington feels really far and away from the average person that is working really hard in a 9-to-5 and hoping to move from a rented apartment to a house they own, single family. The American dream is elusive for so many people, and I get that because I'm the daughter of immigrants. My life will not be what my parents' was. At my age, my parents had already bought their second home, one that they owned. I'm handcuffed to a mortgage. It feels like our leaders are completely abdicating the responsibility they have to future generations because they won't move out of office. Yeah, I'm talking about current President Biden, who wouldn't drop out. And I'm talking about former President Trump, who shouldn't be the nominee. But we have a system that's rife with problems, and our immigration system has been so complex for so long. And Trump said he was going to change everything. He said he would make it so our tax code even could fit on a postcard. He didn't finish the wall. He didn't make our taxes be able to be filed on a postcard. The reality is everybody wants to kick the can down the road. Who's actually working for the average American so that we can move stations in life? Right now, all I'm seeing from both campaigns is pandering to their extreme, to their bases. And then they eventually, you know, do come and do a little bit of the middle of the road dance. But at the end of the day, when we talk about immigration, we're forgetting we lived through a pandemic. We're forgetting that the levels of migrants at the southern border are actually down, the crossings. But who's to actually blame for everything? I blame both parties. The duopoly that can't be broken.
Douglas Sloan, just a little bit of time left. I want to get to one other issue. President Biden and Vice President Harris, they were at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation dinner this weekend. This is what Harris told the gathering. Let's listen.
While we moved and fight to move our nation forward toward a brighter future, Donald Trump and his extremist allies intend to take our nation backward. They will give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations, cut Social Security and Medicare, and end the Affordable Care Act, which the CBC fought so hard to pass. But we are not going back. We are not going back.
So, Douglas, there we have Vice President Harris outlining what she sees as threats facing ordinary American people, ordinary American voters. But she's been in office for 3.5 years in a very powerful position. Why has she not done anything in those 3.5 years?
Well, and yes, that was Vice President Kamala Harris speaking at the CBC Phoenix Awards dinner. So that was the equivalent of a preacher preaching to the choir. She could have said any number of things and got the same amount of applause. But in terms of your question, I think that we all know that the vice president's job as vice president is to help the president implement his policies, implement his initiatives. Al Gore famously disagreed with Bill Clinton on many things, but he couldn't change Bill Clinton's policies because the vice president is supposed to help the president implement his agenda. So when you say, you know, why hasn't she done anything to change? Well, she hasn't quite had the power to do so. She is tasked with implementing Joe Biden's agenda and his policies and initiatives, and that is exactly what she's been doing. We will see her policies, initiatives, and agenda when she is elected on November 5th and takes office on January.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.